Hi, I'm Grant, and if you're thinking about buying a Thermomix TM5 or TM6 and you're not quite sure which one to go for, maybe this video can help. I'll say before we get started that I am not a Thermomix consultant and I'm not affiliated with Vorwerk or Thermomix in any way. I'm just a guy who's got one of either machine and I want to highlight the differences and similarities so you can make the right choice. So, what is a Thermomix? If this video has been sent to you by somebody else, or maybe you've heard someone talking about Thermomix, you might be a little bit confused, but basically a Thermomix is a combination of a heated saucepan, some kitchen scales and a blender. It does get a little bit more complicated than that, but essentially that's what it does. And both of these machines have quite a few different functions. They can blend, they can chop, they can grind, they can stir, they can heat, they can boil, they can steam. There's a lot they can do. And they can really make cooking new dishes a lot more fun and a lot more straightforward. On the outside, they both look pretty much the same. They both have a touchscreen and they only have one button and dial combination, so it's very simple and straightforward to use. The TM5 came out first. It was launched in 2014 and was on sale for 5 years before it was replaced by the TM6. Both machines share the same bottom component, so on your worktop, neither machine is going to take up more space. The differences are hard to spot around the back as well. They both have the same retractable cable, so you're not going to have loads of wires all over your worktop. It's only when you turn the machine onto its side that you get to notice one of the key differences. The TM5 has a communication port, whereas the TM6 doesn't, because it doesn't need it, so they've just filled it in. And if you want to use some of the more fancy features of a Thermomix TM5, you are going to need either one of these, the Thermomix Cook Key, or one of these, the Thermomix Cook Chip. Now these actually snap onto the side of the machine magnetically, and depending on which one you use, you get different functionality. Starting with the Cook Chip, one of these will hold a variety of different recipes depending on the one you've got. So you can have things like Indian or Italian dishes, or you could get this one, which is the basic cookbook, which covers a number of different types of recipes. Once you snap it onto the side of the machine, you can scroll through the different recipes, pick the one you want, and it'll guide you through the cooking process. As simple as that. There is a limitation to these though. There's only so many recipes on each chip and they are becoming quite difficult to find because they're so small. People buy them and then they lose them. So the other option is the Thermomix Cook Key. If you have one of these, you snap it onto the side of the machine as you would do with a Cook Chip, and in a few minutes connect to Wi-Fi and then connect to your Cookie-Do account. And from there you have access to thousands of guided recipes. It really does transform the way the machine works, and if you are getting a TM5, I would highly recommend hunting for one of these or trying to find a machine that comes with the Cook Key, because it will make a massive difference. On the TM6, things are a little bit different. The TM6 has Bluetooth and Wi-Fi built into it, so there's no need to plug anything in or buy anything extra. When you first get the machine, you literally swipe to the left and then you've got access to Cookie-Do. So you can search for all the recipes that you want, type it in, press go, and it guides you through the cooking process. You might be thinking, well, if I've got a TM5, how do I do that? And the thing is, you can't. Because the screen is smaller on the TM5, you simply can't accommodate an on-screen keyboard. So instead, you'll search for recipes using your smartphone, tablet, or a computer to find the recipe you want, and then just send it to the machine. On the TM5, there's a synchronization button, press that, and it will download the recipes that you've picked straight onto the machine. And then, guided cooking is pretty much the same on either machine. Yes, the TM5 has a smaller screen, but essentially it works the same way. It takes you through it step by step, and you cook something new for the first time. However, when you're using either machine, the differences start to become a little bit more apparent. Both the TM5 and TM6 have scales built in, so when you want to add something to the bowl, you can put it into scale mode and it will automatically tell you how much you've added. However, the TM6s are more accurate. It can count up 1 gram at a time, whereas the TM5 counts up 5 grams at a time. For things like guided cooking, it shouldn't really bother you because every recipe that I've seen uses increments of 5 or 10 for its ingredient count, so it really isn't a bother at all, but it is something to bear in mind. There are other differences as well. When you're looking at the two machines, you might think that the bowls are identical. However, they're not. They're the same size, 2.2 litres, but the TM6's bowl can actually heat to a higher temperature because the heating element is in the bottom of the bowl, not in the Thermomix. And that means if you try and put a TM6 bowl onto a TM5 or vice versa, it will tell you you can't use them. They are incompatible with each other. So that's something to bear in mind if you plan to buy a second bowl, or maybe you're trying to assemble a whole lot of different accessories. Speaking of accessories, there are some really neat ones. One of my absolute favourites is from a third party, and it's basically something that pops inside the bowl, and that basically allows you to poach eggs inside the machine. I really struggle with poaching eggs, I don't know why, but I always make them split, or they're a little bit too soft or too firm. With this, you pop the egg poacher inside, turn the dial, add some water, off you go. It's really simple and straightforward. Vorwerk themselves sell quite a few accessories. You can get something called the cutter and something called the peeler. Obviously, if you want to do sous vide, you can buy a sous vide machine that sucks all the air out of the bags when you're making things like that. It really does change the way you think about cooking. And actually, when you're talking about all these different accessories, you might want to think about different modes. Now, the TM5 is a little bit limited. In fact, it really only has a handful of options. If you just tap the screen, you've got things such as turbo mode, dome mode, and pre-clean. Whereas on the TM6, if I just scroll across, we've got loads of different options here. Now, some of them are reliant on accessories. For example, the Thermomix sensor option, and things like the peeler, cutter, slicer mode, they are all compatible with the chopper that goes on the top. But you do have things here such as slow cook, sous vide, high temperature, things that just aren't available on the TM5. And that's where the big difference is going to come into play. If you want to use things like sous vide or high temperature, if you want to do slow cooking to make something like a goulash in here and leave it for a while, you are going to need a TM6. The other thing to bear in mind as well is if you want to use the guided cooking that I've talked about previously, you'll need a subscription to CookieDo, which is the platform that runs all of the guided cooking experiences, either on the TM5 or TM6. Now that costs about £40 a year. I think it's okay. It's not too bad of a price to pay for all those recipes. It would sting a little bit if I just bought the machine and then had to think about paying it as well, because these aren't cheap, let's be honest. But you do then have access to thousands of recipes. There are a couple of small annoyances because there are lots of recipes from all around the world, and there's no way to translate different languages. So there are recipes I'd love to try from places like Slovenia or Spain or Portugal that I don't understand because I don't speak the language. However, they have fixed one thing really recently, which is actually a great thing. Basically, in the past, a recipe was set at a certain portion size. So let's say you found something you really wanted to cook, but it was for 8 people, and you're going to end up with loads of leftover food. Now you can scale the recipe, so depending on how many people you want to cook for, you can adapt it. But I'm just going to say one last time that you really do need to think about guided cooking if you are getting either of these machines, because if you don't pay for the subscription, you lose so much functionality. And if you are going to just get a TM5 that doesn't have a cook chip or a cook key, the only guided recipes on here are for boiled rice, plain yogurt and custard. Woo. So realistically speaking, you are going to want the subscription to CookieDo, and you are going to want the Wi-Fi adapter. And if you've got a TM6, you're going to want that CookieDo subscription, otherwise the machine is essentially just a very expensive blender, kitchen scales and heated saucepan. Coming to the end of this video now, I just want to very quickly say that the TM6 seems to be getting a lot of software updates, and I'll be honest, there are things I think they could have added to the TM5 in software updates as well. For example, there's a big difference between the pre-cleaning modes on the TM6 and the TM5. The TM6 can be adapted, so you can tell it well, basically what you've been cooking, and it will try and adapt the pre-clean to get rid of things that are really stubborn, like caramelized onions or burnt on things onto the bottom of the bowl, whereas on the TM5 it's set. It is a pre-cleaning mode and that's that, and there is a way that they could have added that functionality in. On the TM6 there's also quite a big community of other users. Obviously there are lots of people who love this machine all around the world. So it's one of those machines that seems to be getting a little bit better every time, where the TM5 does kind of feel like it's been forgotten about, which is understandable because they don't sell it anymore and they haven't sold it now for 4 years. But the big question is it worth it? Is it worth having a Thermomix? And that's a really difficult one because I got both of my machines at very, very good deal prices. I didn't pay anywhere near the RRP for these machines, and I'll be honest, if I had to, I wouldn't have paid that. It's a great machine. In fact, they're both great machines, the TM5 and TM6. There's no doubt in my mind that if you have either of these, it can completely change the way you cook and make you more adventurous and actually upskill you as well. But at over £1,000, you can buy so many other bits of equipment that would be incredible in your kitchen. So it's really hard for me to say, yes, go and get one. However, if you can find a good deal, if you can find a slightly pre-owned, loved machine like one of these, get it, because they are fantastic. And whether you go for the TM5 or the TM6, you get lots of functionality, provided you have Wi-Fi access and guided cooking. I hope this helps. Thanks for watching.